the disintegration of the Soviet Union got us into a false representation of the way history was moving. This was wrongly interpreted as a victory of the West, with as significance the superiority of the Western or Anglo-American model or conception of society, capitalism, liberal democracy, and so on, and as a failure of communism. A failure of communism, it certainly was. But what people hadn't noticed at the time, that as early as the middle 1960s, the American society had started its long-term decline. It was already possible to observe a decline in educational standards, an industrial decline, all types of decline. And what happened then was a sort of a mad, when you think of it in sort of general historical terms, sort of mad, the expansion of an already disintegrating system, you see, with something hollow at the center moving, following the collapse of the Soviet system, with NATO moving into Eastern Europe, threatening Russia. There comes a point where there you get to a point when Russia, after a very difficult period, gets stable again, reveals itself as deeply attached to its own sovereignty, and says stop, and that's enough. And then the war in Ukraine appears as a sort of a reality test, and what appears is the I would say the massive weakness of the West. Am I clear? Do you?
Yes.
It's and what's important to me is to go beyond the. Of course, I'm following what goes on in the war itself. I mean, what's happening in Ukraine is tragic, and I know now that we're very close to a complete collapse of the Ukrainian army and regime. But to me, what's important, again, it's long-term terms. I do remember quite well the moment when I wrote the book. That was in the summer of 2023, just in the mid of the Ukrainian so-called counteroffensive. Everybody was in the West was boasting about the great successes of the Ukrainians and the inevitable collapse of the Putin regime and so on. And I just remember I was in my very small house in Brittany, and I was very calm and determined, and without any hesitation of any kind, I was writing the defeat of the West is certain. And why could I be so certain? Because I'm not dealing in TV programs and superficial data. It's I had my analysis of the collapse of the industrial economy in the US, the decline of the educational level, the flight out of manual work, the leading to a lack of engineers. One of the most important, I would say that if you take my first book, the final fall, the one on the coming collapse of the Soviet Union, I would say that my main statistical indicator was the infant death rate. In the case of the defeat of the West, I suddenly realized this now, this very moment. The central indicator in my book is I remember the way when I succeeded in getting an estimate of the number of engineers getting out of US and Russian universities or technical centers or whatever they're called. And when I just was able to calculate that the Russians, with a population 2.5 times smaller than that of the US, were able to produce more engineers. Engineers are, and well, when you say engineers, you must think engineers plus technicians, qualified workers, everything concerned with producing material things, and this is the core element. And I just knew that the US doesn't have the means to pursue the war because they don't have the people, they don't have the kind of labor force that's necessary. And well, I know that these days the Pentagon and the Rand Corporation just agree with me. There's no question about it. That's the way I function. I'm not trying to give a sort of general and detailed analysis of thing. I'm just trying to give people a feeling of the way I function.
Yeah. No, I remember the counteroffensive in 2023 as well. The media coverage and the discourse as well. I felt there was a alternate reality like this. I didn't understand how they could read it in this way. But the way you speak,
the word reality, it ought to be the central word these days, because moving in and out of reality is very much the game we play these days.
You seem to have something in common as well, though, with Thomas Piketty, because he also makes this argument that as the Cold War has come to an end and the Soviet Union thereafter collapsed, the Anglo-American model was already exhausted, but because of what was seen as victory, there was this hubris. So in victory, one assumes one has all the answers, and instead of trying to seek economic recovery and rebuilding society, which had been exhausted by a lot of this neoliberal economics, we instead put the gas fully down and steamed ahead. And this is then, as you suggested, exacerbated a lot of those structural weaknesses. But you then look at the family.
Yes, I very much agree with this. There's one thing we could add, and that's one of the things I'm working on, apart from the Bronze Age. It's the in its most the most efficient period in the history of Western capitalism was, in fact, the period when the USSR was okay. You see, it's as if the existence of communism had made optimal capitalism possible. You see, with a social conscience, with an active state, and the capitalism that had to use some of the good tools suggested by socialism and communism. And as soon as the USSR collapsed, and when the collapse was interpreted as a sort of general collapse of anything invented by socialism or planners or anything, then the decline of the West accelerated, in fact, because they had lost something that was necessary to a proper, smooth functioning of capitalism.
Yeah, that's also John Hertz. He famously wrote in the 50s that liberal ideologies work best when they're in opposition to outdated form of governance. So once they're without competition, they begin to destroy themselves, which seems to be
that's even better said. Yeah, that's it.
Well, if we look then at the demography, education, family, the loss of cultural coherence, secular nihilism, are all of these like red flags you see currently though in across the political West?
Yes, I mean the yes, the new thing in this book is it's a new emphasis on religion and the decline of religion. You see, my my real trade is the study of family systems. You see, that's the only field in which I'm truly competent. Well, give me any part of the world, I'll give you a description of the basic family system, and I can get it to regional differences. Take any country. Well, let's not do it, but I could do it. Now, and no, it's important because when I look at social systems, I do not see states' ideologies. I see mentalities derived from family systems. For example, the weakness of the West these days is the West, the core, the Anglo-American world and France, or northern France, is that the basic anthropological structure is the nuclear family. As early as the Middle Ages, it's that when you look at households, all you could see was a father, mother, children, and nothing else. And the time of marriage, the children had to move out of the family, and this explains this makes it possible to explain the great flexibility of the Western world. Whereas in Germany, you had what's called a STEM family. That's eldest son inheritance and vertical family systems with a great deal of authority and inequality. In the case of Russia, you could find among Russian peasants what I call the community or communitarian family. That's father, his sons, with women exchange like parcels between families at the time of marriage, but something that uh, when the community family disintegrated, it sort of transmitted its values to communism. That's authority, equality, and so on. And this, of course, communism collapsed for economic reasons, but there's still something left in Russian culture of this community feeling, and which explains the resilience of Russia and the stability of Russian society after the sufferings of the 1990s. And knowing this is what makes it possible for me to say that the problem is not Putin, the Putin regime, or fascism from above. It's that that makes it social anthropology makes it possible to see Russia as or Putin as produced by Russian culture rather than Putin manipulating uh, Russian society. And of course, this I've a sort of a instinctive feeling of the stability of Russian society because of this social anthropological knowledge. But to come to the point, in this book, I add a new variable that is really central, and it is that is not a very center of my research work, and that's religion. I have a description of the decline of religion. I'm not religious at all myself. I'm not a believer. I'm not. I've no nostalgia of anything. You see, I'm just a historian trying to understand things, and so I have this description of the secularization in with three moments. You start with active religion, where people believe in God, and with all the behavior that's associated with this. Then you have what I call zombie religion, when religion disappears, in that people stop believing in God, but retain the values and habits, the morals produced or associated with active religion. This is a moment of great dynamism in the history of society. People are freed from the constraints of tradition, but are left with the possibility of collective action. They have morals. They keep work habits inherited from the past, and religion is replaced by, well, let's say, ideologies. So take France, for instance, in 1789, the French Revolution starts, well, a few decades after the collapse of religious practice in the Paris Basin. And then you've got a sort of tremendous release of energy. But Catholicism is replaced by the nation, or the Germans would say la grande nation, the great nation, with a measure of hostility to that great nation. And you got the French Revolution with its very positive value, and every time religion collapses, it sort of releases sort of a new social, a new type of social dynamism, and so is that the second stage of zombie religion. But of course, what in France will be the French Revolution with its ideal of liberty and equality, because family structures were liberal and egalitarian, while in a country like Germany will produce darker things. Well, no, social democracy is all right, in my view, but Nazism isn't, you see. And social democracy, Nazism would be the zombie stage in Germany. Communism would be the zombie stage after the collapse of the Orthodox religion in Russia. But now, since perhaps perhaps this is the real turn of the beginning of the third millennium, we've reached the state of zero religion, and zero religion is something entirely different. It's when nothing is left. Nothing is left. You no longer have the belief in God, of course, but you've lost the morals, the social habits, the all that makes collective action possible. And this, in that zero stage of religion, people start being overwhelmed by a feeling of meaningless emptiness. And this feeling of emptiness, the feeling that nothing or no value exists, leads to what I call nihilism. So that's a deification of nothing. and an urge to destroy things, people, or destroy reality in a way back to the world of reality. And I think this is what makes the analysis of what's going on these days in the immediate geopolitical world difficult. It's on the one hand, well, I'm not forgetting traditional, rational factors. The question of power, the question of control of the economic forces, incomes. You see, I'm not. I told you I'm not a religious person. My contact with reality is complete in a way, and there's and you can build a model of what's going on using the notion of a disintegration of the economic might of the US. I was talking about the lack of engineers, the military industrial base, and so on. All this is rational, and with all this, you can explain much of what is happening in the conflict with Russia. To me, what I'm dealing with is the conflict between the US and Russia. The Ukraine is completely secondary in my view, but that if you consider that the lust for power is rational, which I don't, but it seems that many old politicians think power is a rational goal. Well, that's their game. Well, this exists. There's no question. But what I feel these days more and more that to this must be added and taken into account a new, very dangerous, irrational element connected with the zero state of religion, with the emergence of nihilism. And I must admit that in my most recent interviews in France, I more and more speculate on the spread of evil. You see, I'm not being very religious. I'm not used to. I'm not used to using concepts of good and evil, but I fear what I feel now is that part of what is happening has much more to do with evil than with any rational fight or competition for power.